In 2010, Andy Grove was having dinner at a restaurant in Palo Alto when he met three Chinese venture capitalists visiting Silicon Valley. Grove had retired from Intel in 2005. The company he built was still making huge profits, even during the 2008-9 recession when many people in Silicon Valley lost their jobs. But Grove wasn't celebrating. He was still deeply concerned about the future. Seeing Chinese investors in Silicon Valley made him wonder, was it smart to send so much manufacturing overseas, especially during times of high unemployment in the US? Grove wasn't anti-immigrant or anti-global. He was a Jewish refugee who had escaped from both Nazi and Soviet forces. Intel had employees in factories around the world, but Grove was worried about America losing its edge in advanced manufacturing. He saw the iPhone as a perfect example. It had just launched 3 years earlier, but most of its parts weren't made in the US. Offshoring had started with low-skill jobs, but Grove believed it wouldn't stop there. He was also concerned about electric car batteries, where the US was falling behind, even though much of the original battery tech was developed in China. His solution imposed a special tax on products made with offshore labor. If that caused a trade war, Grove said, treat it like other wars, fight to win. Many people thought Grove was out of touch. They saw him as a man from an earlier era, someone who had built Intel before the internet even existed. Intel had missed the smartphone boom and was still relying on profits from its x86 chip monopoly. In the early 2010s, Intel still had the world's best chip making technology. It continued shrinking transistors regularly, just like it had during Gordon Moore's days. But companies like TSMC and Samsung were catching up. Also, Intel was no longer a case name in tech. Companies like totally different business models had taken over. For example, Apple, with its mobile ecosystem, didn't even use Intel chips. Intel had also missed the rise of the internet economy. By 2010, Facebook, which launched in 2006, was also as much as half as much as Intel, and it would soon be worth many times more. Sure, Intel could argue that the internet still ran on its server chips, and that people access data using Intel powered PCs, but the truth was making chips earned less money than selling ads on apps. Grove admired disruptive innovation, but now Intel itself was being disrupted. Grove warned about companies like Apple offshoring production, but few people listened. Even in the chip industry, many experts disagreed with Grove's warning. It was true that companies like TSMC had factories overseas, but most of the chip designs still came from American firms. And those foreign factories used US-made tools to manufacture the chips. In fact, offshoring had always been part of the chip industry. Grove's own first employer, Fairchild Semiconductor, opened a factory in Hong Kong late back in the 1960s. But Grove didn't change his mind. He warned that if America gave up commodity manufacturing today, it would miss out on future industries. He gave the battery industry as an example. The US lost leadership in consumer electronics, then PC batteries, and now electric vehicle batteries. In 2010, he predicted, I doubt the US will ever catch up. Some disagreed with Grove and pointed out that American chip industry was doing well compared to the late 1980s, where Japan was beating the US in chip design and manufacturing. By the 2000s, fabless chip industries in the US with design but don't manufacture chips were making big profits too. And even though America had lost the lead even in the extreme ultraviolet lithography, its chip making equipment companies were thriving. For example, Applied Materials was the world's largest unified chip equipment like machine for lathe chemical layers on silicon. Lam Research was a leader in tools that turn tiny circuits into chips. Clearly had the best machine for spotting tiny defects on wafer and masks. These companies were developing new machines to deposit, carve, and measure chips at the atomic level, essential for making the next generation of semiconductors. Only a few Japanese companies like Tokyo Electron could even come close. The US also dominated in chip design software. By the end of 2010s, chips had over a billion transistors each, and designing them required advanced software. Three American companies, Cadence, Synopsys and Mentor control about 75% of the market. It was almost impossible to design a modern chip without using at least one of their tools. Most smaller design software firms were also based in the US. So when Wall Street and the US government looked at Silicon Valley, they saw profitable and advanced chip industry. Yes, there were risks, especially because so many chips were being made in China and Taiwan. In 1999, a major earthquake in Taiwan, magnitude 7.3, cut power to much of the island, including TSMC factories and nuclear plants. This interrupted chip production and threatened global chip supply. In 1999, when a strong earthquake hit Taiwan, Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, immediately called government officials to make sure the government got priority access to power. 4 out of TSMC's 5 chip factories were back up in a week. A fifth took longer, still the damage was limited. The electronics market returned to normal within a month. That fate was only the third strongest in Taiwan in the 20th century. That could be worse. TSMC told customers that their factories could survive earthquake up to magnitude 9, which has only happened 5 times since 1900. It was a bold claim and no one wanted to test it. TSMC also had a good counterpoint. Silicon Valley sits on the San Andreas fault. So moving factories back to California wasn't much safer. The bigger issue was how the US government would deal with foreign sales of chip technology in an industry that had become global. In the 1980s, when Japan was a major threat, Silicon Valley CEOs worked closely with the US government. But by the 1990s and 2000, tech giants in California had distanced themselves from tech and Japan. Now they wanted fewer regulations, more free trade deals, and looser export controls. Many leaders in Washington agreed. They believed that allowing trade with countries like China would help them become more responsible members of the global system. This was the thinking of diplomats like Robert Solvik. Also, globalization seemed unstoppable. Even during the Cold War, it was hard to stop US allies from selling tech to the Soviet Union. But China in the 2000s was far more connected to the world economy. The US concluded that the export controls wouldn't work. America didn't sell to China, Europe, or Japan would. Instead of trying to block China, the US chose a new strategy: run faster. That meant staying ahead through innovation, not regulation. One American expert said it was highly unlikely that the US would depend on China for any single product, even semiconductors. In fact, the US used SMIC, China's top chip company, a special status called validated end user. This meant the US trusted SMIC not to sell to China immediately and exempted it from some export rules. Only a few lawmakers, mostly Southern Republicans, opposed this idea, but almost everyone else in Washington supported the run faster approach. His plans were good, but there was one big problem. The US wasn't actually running faster. It was falling behind in key areas. Few in the government looked closely at the data, but anecdotal warning about his manufacturing skills overseas were starting to come through. In 2007, the Pentagon asked the former official Richard Van Atta to study how globalization of the chip industry might affect the military supply chains. Van Atta had worked in defense electronics for decades. He knew the benefits of global efficiency, but also the risks. His conclusion: the US military would soon rely on foreign countries for its most advanced chips, because so much manufacturing had moved overseas. During peacetime, this system was fine, but in a crisis it could be dangerous. Still, no one in Washington seemed worried. He believed the US was running faster without checking if it was true. But the history of the chip industry didn't guarantee US dominance. The US didn't beat Japan in the 1980s. Though it did recover in the 1990s, it failed to keep up in interactive where companies like CA lost to Nippon and ASML. In memory chips, DRAM only Micron survived against recent competitors. Any other US component like this. By the end of the 2000s, Intel still had the leading small transistor, but the gap with Samsung and TSMC was slim. Intel was slowing down, even though it still benefited from being ahead in the past. India still led in chip design, but other countries were catching up. For example, MediaTek in Taiwan was showing that road chip design wasn't limited to America. When at a defensive material technology sold in 2007, US leadership will likely erode seriously over the next decade, but no one was really seeing it.